So the question is, can educated, wise people hope? Do we have the right to hope? Do we have the permission to hope? So when you are brought up in a secular scientific paradigm, you are trained to think that nature has no meaning, right? There's no thrust, there's no intention, no agenda. This just happened randomly, right? And I think if you ask any substantial scientist, I think they'll tell you something to the effect of, yeah, there's probably a lot that we don't understand, and as such, it would be foolish for any scientist to ever discount anything mystical or anything holy, maybe even, I don't know. But when you are, educated, and then you continue your education, and you kind of base your soul, your sense of self in this world of, rationalism, enlightened rationalism, if you will, then I think what ends up happening is when you get into these kinds of situations where there is no you can rationalize it and you can say, yeah, honey, this is this is our human species evolving, trying to figure out its, how to not have that one protein fold incorrectly, we can rationalize it, sure, but that's not what's up, right? That's not what's happening with these things called people, right? Now that might be this thing going on with that other thing that I was referring to earlier, the you inside the person. I mean, the whole notion of there being something inside us is just outstanding. It's such an incredible notion. It's only when you start to release that notion that you start to recognize what a gift this is, where we are and what's happening. It's only when you come to realize that no, your body is a holy thing. That notion of the body as sacred is a real deal thing. There's billions of us though, right? So you just start thinking to yourself, well, how can billions of something be sacred? They are, folks. The universe is vast. It's like the network, right? The network is vast. So
where does the newborn go from here? The net is vast and infinite.
It becomes very difficult for educated, wise people to do things like hope. Because you start to very quickly think about what some refer to as realities. The reality of the FDA actually fast-tracking the neurone treatment. The reality of insurance companies actually quickly coming to some way of being able to sustain some stem cell treatment for potentially 30,000 patients across the country. There's a lot of things that can really get in the way, and you can try to work through those kinds of things by coming up with plans and Twitter campaigns and YouTube videos, and going down to the DC, or going knocking on the door of your congressperson and saying, hey, I've got ALS. This isn't okay. We need to do something and do it now. And we've already done it, actually. So all you got to do is lobby for it to get to my body, When that kind of world hits you, the logic is not what you're dealing with. Like I'm telling you, both my wife and I are just gripped. I mean, I am gripped. I feel like, anyway, doesn't matter what I feel like. So, what I'm trying to drive at here is that I think that psychology that educated people, and I don't mean to be a highfalutin with college degrees. I'm just talking about people who have taken the time to read something, people who have taken the time to learn something from someone else, as opposed to just their own thing, people who have submitted themselves to, yes, perhaps a regimen of study. Yeah, so no, maybe I am saying, yeah, people who go to college, basically. But I just don't want to be snobby about it and say it's only people who go to college. No, you don't have to have gone to college to get what I'm talking about. When you're a wise guy, you start thinking about, yeah, hope isn't really hope, right? There really is no hope. Hope is just fear manifesting with a smile. So the thing that McKenna was talking about with eros and eschaton, you know, these are concepts that he believed were the basis of the paradigm of a more archaic time that gave permission to people to hope. But his contention is that the dominator culture has basically squelched and knocked out any opposition or any fight to its worldview, right? Because I think if you have your eyes open, I think you're going to start thinking that this hopeless existential view of what reality is, what's going on, that science provides is it ain't gonna fly. Yeah, there's order that's being exhibited, and it's being exhibited on different scales. And what science would say about that is that it's a coincidence. So basically, what I'm saying is that science overlooks something, and what jumps out as maybe happenstance is actually just about this weird set of relationships that a great word that Terence McKenna uses is casuistry, I believe. You know, the weird connections of how things happen and why they happen, the relationships to one another, and how sometimes these things are hidden from us, right? And you know, in my 48 years, I've had a lot of incredible experiences, some very spiritual experiences, for lack of a better term. I don't think that's the right term, but that's what the nomenclature is nowadays. That everything builds on one another, right? Complexity is just a part of the universe. It's like a natural law. So nature builds on itself. It builds on complexity. So like when the universe was born, you know, however it was born, right? Terence calls it, you know, it's got a great line about that. You know, the Big Bang thing, right? It was, you know, basically he tells a story about how, well, you know, the Big Bang was this big pure plasma of electrons. It was simple. It could, the smallest thing there was, no atoms, no anything, no organized systems, no molecules. It was just plasma expanding, and as the universe cooled, and Rogan actually referenced this particular exchange, as things cooled, you know, new phenomena came about, and you know, out of this situation, you know, came Earth, right? Then the universe keeps on cooling. He's such a great, I mean, that's the way he tells it, man. He's just, it's like a poetry. It's poetry, you know, just like it's all just complexifying more and more so, you know. And now we're getting to, you know, we have something called the internet now, right? Where technology has now gotten into the game. You know, technology is now basically ensconced in our evolutionary process, you know, because, you know, we're now globified, baby. We live in an information-based culture. You know, the universe, the way it works, you know, it's basically a platform of for previously achieved complexity to continue to complexify. This is something that arguably science doesn't take into consideration. That out of this soup of complexity comes more complexity. Basically, it's a system. It's a system that conserves novelty. That's Terence's big thing. Novelty conservation. It's a complexity conserving engine. It makes complexity and it preserves the idea of making complexity. Because every time there's a motion for complexity into this novel world, about newness, about innovation, things are actually happening more quickly. This novelty notion is according to history, really is amplifying at a ridiculously crazy rate. And if you really pursue that line of thought that things are moving more quickly, there's more and more novel things that are occurring. Human, if you look at the lineage of our species going back to Australopithecines, Australopithecus, or whatever is the latest oldest human species, like a quarter billion years or something, some ungodly amount of time, we didn't have language. And then suddenly we have language, and that just excels us, cuts things short, right? And then we have, for example, we have the Roman Renaissance, right? First you have the Greek Renaissance, right? In the 100 BC or 200 BC or so, and then or even actually older than that. And then you have the Roman Renaissance that occurs, right? Taking shorter periods of time, right? So for example, one of the best ways to think of it is that the European Renaissance, right, which I guess arguably would be from the 15th century maybe up to the 17th century, or maybe late 17th century, maybe even into the late 18th century actually. That's a couple hundred years, right? If you step a couple hundred years before that, you have the Arabic Renaissance, the Middle Eastern Renaissance that occurred, which is what gave us a lot of mathematics, like algebra, like a lot of brilliant innovations that came out of the Middle East. Well, that took about 400 or 500 years, right? That was like the Dark Ages period. And then we hit the Renaissance, and that came about 200 to 300 years or so, right, give or take. Then we have things like the American Revolution period, right? These explosive events that are occurring, and that took what, about 40 years or so, right? And then we have, the 60s, man, right? The Renaissance, basically, of the European Renaissance squeezed into a 10, 15, 20-year period. In America, right? It's just getting a shorter amount of time. And the idea is that if you notice that trend, if you also agree that things are getting faster and faster and faster, and you're willing to forego the possibility that maybe it's just the way our brain processes information, but if you're willing to say no, there really is something objectively faster going on, then you have to, start to recognize that eventually you and I are going to be marginalized, my friend, right? Because it sure ain't about people, right? We're small. We're just a part of this planet. So if it's not about people, then if it's about existence, if it's about the general concept of the spirit of life, and we're seeing advancement, right, then we're going to have to be prepared to get marginalized. I mean, we'll see it all happen, but we'll have to be spectators to the process of how it is that how it is that the world advances. So I guess if you buy the premise that there's a complexifying thing happening here, the novelty is the name of the game here. If in fact the conservation and complexification of novelty is what the universe is looking for, then basically our own endeavors, which again, marginalized, we can think of it as actually taking on a much more immense importance, right? Because then we can see ourselves as players in that drama that's unfolding. We can see ourselves as having a central role in it. We can even see ourselves as being the pinnacle of the expression of that complexification that's been happening for billions and billions of years in our universe. Yes, it's in the animal world, but somehow all of that complexification has led up to us. It's been concentrated into this thing called human. You know, and we have this thing called language, right? We have consciousness. We have higher, or I'll call educated values. Not higher, I don't want to say better, but it's just educated values. So the more we get more and more complex, the more quickly things happen. Things get faster and faster and faster. So we're basically a species, and we're maybe we're not, maybe we are not as constrained as other animals are on the planet, because we were able to basically create multiple worlds, right? I referenced epigenetics, in my other posts. We can think of this as we're epigenetic worlds, right? We're in a world, and we have this ability through our voice and language and minds and bodies to create new worlds, that are not based on gene transfer, right? Or chemical propagation or preservation of information, but a world based on ideas, based on symbols, based on technologies, based on tools, ideas downloaded out of the human imagination and concentrated in three-dimensional space as freaking, helicopters and particle accelerators and gene CRISPR sequencing tools and spacecraft, and all of that beauty that comes out of complexification, or the advent, the pursuit of novelty. So again, let me tie it back. I'm trying to get at this idea that science might be a problem here, right? That science may have overlooked this phenomenon that we call existent life, right? Now, eschaton, that's a different thing, right? Remember, reliving this thing that he did. But eros and eschaton, right? Eschaton is a word that you don't hear very often unless you're into theology and stuff. It basically is it's a Greek word. It comes from the word esk, or the root esk, which basically means finished, end. So the eschaton is the last thing, the final thing, right? So eros, complexity, some forward motion towards something, and eschaton is this idea of this thing, this final end object. And it's very important to the scientists to really get rid of any kind of thinking, any suspicion that there might be something like this, right? Because if it were real, if this eschaton exists, it would impart onto what you and I refer to as reality a purpose, we say, and can't have that, right? With science, that's no good. So if there is an eschaton, then that means that there's a goal, right? Or there's something that's attracting us. There's some sort of a sync, some sort of an energy flow that's taking place. And, science is just hostile about that kind of stuff, That's not okay, in my opinion. Because now it's come to a place where if you're not in the sciences, that means that, you're nobody. The thing is, I'm not trying to diss science in this rant here. Modern science is defined based on 1800s mentality. When all people were thinking about, they were coming out of the world of, Washington and Jefferson and all that stuff. The deists, the deism was, pretty much about, the clock theory of the universe. The universe is basically a big clock, and God runs it. And God has said, I'm done with this clock, and walked away, basically, right? So maybe the thinking is that then as we evolved, we said, okay, well, we have to then create a paradigm that doesn't require a goal, right? Doesn't require a reason, and it's pushed forward. Or nothing is being pulled. Everything is being pushed forward based on previous events, right? And the problem with that is that, our intuition says no. We can see evolution. We can see biology. We can see that things are built on chemistry. We can see social systems. We can see biology or history. Yeah, we do have a purpose. I don't know what it is, but I feel whatever it is, it's something moving forward. I think that I want to believe in a coherent cosmos. All right. And I want to suggest that my own identity and your identity is rooted in a sense of purpose. And it's a small little, infinitesimal, microscopic little glint in the scope of the universe. But it's there, man. We're not just, whistling Dixie here. That's why I don't throw away things like church and God and love and, this stuff. It's not just a nice idea. It's not just, Jesus stuff. No. It's really it's a real theory of reality. Reality is accelerating towards some sort of an omega point, right? I mean, this is all that stuff from Stanley Kubrick's 2001, that the idea of the obelisk in that is the eschaton. That's the concept that he's referring to. Who knows about 2001 and Space Odyssey? I hope you do, friend. Peace. And we're doing it in multiple ways, right? I mean, it's not just this thing that's happening to us with ALS, but at the micro level, we're polluting the earth. We're wrecking our oceans. We're basically dehumanizing ourselves, man. Saying, hey, keep it professional. Well, it's not personal; it's professional. That kind of stuff. That basically makes us basically become automatons. That's just code for you need to act like a robot. When somebody says it's not personal, it's professional. Hey, you know what? It's just business. You know what? The idea of something being personal, the clue is in the word, right? If there's a person involved, it's personal, right? Anyway, so getting back to what my point was, that I started this festival of words off with, that idea of, can educated people who see science but know there's more to it than science, can we be hopeful? Can we be optimistic? And, in talking to Olga, this is what she says. She says it depends on basically where you placed your bet. If you placed your bet on, the male-dominated, institutions, consumer fetishism, propaganda, classism, materialism, God and country, you fall for the freaking, the machine that pulls you in and makes you feel like you belong, and all that stuff. God help you, man. You should call for help. But if you maybe earlier on in life you recognize that, what, there is a way here, something's happening here, there's something really important happening here, there's something powerful and personal happening here, that could free your mind, then yeah, then it's probably that you're going to be okay, you know. Because you got to know that there's real purpose to what's happening, right? So let me tie this and make this more personal, just so you can see why I'm talking about this stuff. This is what's happening. This is what's happening. So, you know, Olga is going through this process now, of course, of, you know, she's always really been a religious person, you know. She's an Orthodox Christian, Russian Orthodox. But Olga and I go to this church, and you know, it's tough for me to go, man. You know, again, because I'm that guy. I'm that guy that spent most of his life saying things like, "Oh, please, come on now, come." Just deal with it. You're going to be dust. Get over it. Yeah, you can say that kind of stuff when you're 30, right? Or when you're 20, you know, and you got your body and you're doing pull-ups and freaking jogging on the Venice beach. Hey, hello, ladies, you know. But, you know, then you get older and osteoporosis kicks in. I don't have osteoporosis, but I wonder if you know someone who has osteoporosis or fatty liver disease or neuropathy or, you know, paralysis or blah, 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 man. Anyway, so, and she and I have been talking quite a bit lately, you know, because I think she's appreciative of the fact that despite the fact that, you know, I hold the religious right. It was the evangelical mindset that pushed George W. Bush to basically say ixnay on the research, you know. And look, Clinton didn't do it any favors. This isn't so much about the left or the right. It's about the mentality that, you know, gripped America all of a sudden, you know, anyway, and put us behind a decade. So no, it's not the FDA, it's not ALSA, it's the religious right that did this to us. Yes, we would have already had Nero. We would have had it 10 years ago. All right, so Olga's been going through, you know, this process of, you know, coming to terms with herself a little bit, and obviously, you know, she and I agree that there is a lot of advantage to a person that buys into a faith early in their life and they hang on to that. You know, I think there's some real beauty because when you get to these kinds of places, it's still going to sting. You're still going to be terrified and scared, but it's not going to have that edge, and it's that edge, folks. It's that edge that just grips my heart when I see it in her eyes. It's terror. I think that's the right way of putting it. It's terror. And in that respect, ALS is a terrorist. So, you know, she's been valuing the fact that she never really gave up her faith, even though she went through. Of course, you know, she's a rational, intelligent, well-educated woman, but you know, there's something about that idea of the mystery, you know, that you know has kept her going, you know, and it's working beautifully, you know. So that bit. Now, Elon Musk, I heard him when he was on Rogan. He one of the questions was, you know, one of the things Rogan wanted to find out about Musk was, does he think that, you know, this really, you know, reality is just a simulation? Because that's what he said he thinks. Elon Musk believes that all reality is basically a simulation being played by something or someone. Played out, I should say. And so he says, well, how can you, what's your rationale? Well, he asks Musk, what's your rationale? And Musk says, look, take improvement, right? If you can accept the concept of growth, if you can accept the concept of anything improving, then add infinity to that. You know, and then you see that, of course, that's the reality. That's not the possibility. That's the reality. And so I'm tying it now back to, you know, why it is at Eros and Eschaton that talk he gave popped into my headspace again. Is because that's kind of what he was talking about too, and that's kind of what Kubrick is, not Kubrick, but Sir Arthur C. Clarke was talking about in Space Odyssey. You know, that's what Kubrick, that's why he was so grabbed by it, and that's why that movie was a cultural smashola, you know, because it was the literati and the intellectual elite of the Europe and America that just went, wow, look at this. Is we think this is going to be the new paradigm that will be in place about 40, 50, maybe 100 years from now, potentially. That's what was so exciting about that period, you know, the 60s and 70s filmmaking and music and all that stuff. The eschaton, you know, is that obelisk, right? The idea that there is something happening. We are being pulled towards something. It's not just being pushed towards it, right? Coupled with this idea of, dude, things are getting faster, right? There is forward motion. There is a complexification. There is a novelty. What's the word? Novelty. Crave. Yes, we crave novelty. Right? We crave novelty. So given novelty, given this need to grow, get better, improve, faster, better, harder, stronger, easier, calmer. And this idea that maybe things aren't being pushed, but things are being pulled, should give you and I, you know, pals and pals, and really anybody, you know, some solace that, yeah, I'm still going to go into this pretty terrified. We're all going to go into this pretty terrified, right? You know, just Olga and I are both in this terrible situation because Olga's going into it fast, right? Can you imagine that? You're floating along a river and you look over and your spouse starts to somehow float faster, but you're not floating faster and you can't float as fast, even if you wanted to. That's what's happening with her, and with me, you know, I'm having to grieve a person that is still alive, you know. Okay, all right. But we can hope, man. We can hope. Or maybe we don't need to hope, because again, looks pretty obvious to me that there's a purpose and something's happening and I'm part of it and Olga is part of it. So as long as there was a purpose and all of this wasn't for naught, you know, then yeah, radical, man. Things worked out well, right? And things continue to work out well, right? We're moving forward. Who knows? Maybe things will speed up so quickly we'll get neuron into our body faster than the speeding bullet.